think of when you hear the word biology? Do you know what it means? Let's break the word down. Bio means life. Logy means the study of something. So if we put bio and logy together, we can...
Hello.
Good morning, everyone. I, Priyadashri Chauhan, Superintendent Engineer Instrumentation, on behalf of the entire family of Technical Services, welcome you all on today's program of Technical Seminar on Biofuel and E-Fuel under Stages of Custom, 2022. Our particular English also to brief and peace analysis. Celebrating a month-long program under the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas and the campaign of Peace Program. The campaign aims at highlighting the adverse health and environmental impacts of reducing carbon footprint towards environment. Please pay attention. This technical seminar is online and it is going to be posted live on the web. I request Shri Gopal Joshi, PGM, Basic Geology, Basic Manager, Frontier Basin, to welcome our dignitary speaker, Shri N.S. Siddiqui ji.
Hello. I'm going to
Petroleum and Energy Dehradun with Dr. Garushi ji. Please give a warm applause. Now I request Shri Jagad Rajaji, EM Electrical in charge, ESL Technical Services, to welcome our chief guest, Shri Gopal Joshi, PGM Station Manager, Frontier Basin, Dr. Rajaji. माननीय श्री जगत राजाजी, प्रोफेसर सिद्धि प्रभारी TA वर्ग तकनीकी सेवा देहरादून आगे टेक्निकल वेलकम एड्रेस एंड प्रोग्राम अटेंडेंस के लिए सेक्शन 2022 को कार्यक्रम को सबको एड्रेस करा।
Respected teachers, Sri Gopal Joshi ji, Basic Manager, Frontier Basin, Dehradun. Respected Dr. N.S. Siddiqui, Professor, Quality Manager, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, UPS, Dehradun. Colleagues, I welcome you all to this session of technical seminar on Custom 2020 is the energy conservation campaign drive aims to aware about energy conservation among the masses. During this campaign, we are organizing various activities like PUC, awareness in the schools, pollution control research, technical seminars, and programs in the industries to make the masses aware about the energy conservation. As we know that we have very limited resources, we have only 0.6% of the world reserve, so it is very, very necessary to use our precious fossil fuels very judiciously. This seminar is organized just to promote the alternative fuels, biofuels and clean fuels. In details, Dr. Siddiqui will deliver. मैं ज़्यादा समय न लेता हुआ आप सबका यहाँ बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूँ। थैंक यू।
small video clip from our ministry. They have a message to convey about conservation of energy. Let us see.
हेलो। हाँ देख रहा हूँ। हाँ मतलब चला रखा है मैंने। क्या आ रहा है? मतलब एयर क्या आ रहा हो तो बता। 2 मिनट डला किसी 2 मिनट है पक्का आईपी का डला हुआ है।
हम सत्यनिष्ठा से प्रतिज्ञा करते हैं कि अपने सभी कार्यों में पेट्रोलियम उत्पादों के संरक्षण हेतु सतत प्रयासरत रहेंगे। देश की प्रगति के लिए आवश्यक इन सीमित संसाधनों की आपूर्ति अधिक समय तक हम पेट्रोलियम पदार्थों के व्यर्थ उपयोग को रोकने के लिए लोगों को जागरूक करेंगे। आगे आने वाली पीढ़ी के लिए एक बेहतर वातावरण एक नए व स्वस्थ भारत का निर्माण कर सकें। We do hereby solemnly pledge that we shall continuously striving to conserve petroleum products in all spheres of our activities, so that supplies of these scarce resources last longer for the progress of our country. We will shoulder the responsibility of a good citizen and endeavor to create awareness among the masses to avoid wasteful use of petroleum products so as to build a new and healthy India for our future generations by ensuring a better environment. Thank you. Just like to say a few words because I may not be here for too long. I have a meeting lined up. So, Mr. Alharia at Technical Services and Dr. Siddiqui from UPES We were also expecting Director IP, but he's I think not able to join us. So what I would like to stress here is that yes, what our minister has just said is of great relevance, because these products that we are excessively using and not switching off our car at the red light, we stress and work very hard to get these petroleum products out from the earth, and they are limited in resources. So we need to be very conscious, and we must give at least our conscious efforts for the conservation of this. And for this, definitely we need the academia industry bridge to take care of this, because academics is continuously working on these aspects of how to conserve, which are the better fuels for us, so that it doesn't damage our atmosphere. So for that, I'm sure Dr. Siddiqui will be of great use to all of you for the knowledge that he has got for so many decades, and I'm sure we'll make good use of his presence here. So with that, thank you very much for calling me in, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
So I think I'll have to make a move because I have a meeting lined up.
Definitely.
So
I will meet you sometime.
I think we met somewhere.
Yeah, I think we have met. Because I used to be a regular visitor of this.
I was in Frontier Bases earlier. Then I left for probably.
Yeah, there I did a presentation on EIE also.
Oh,
Some
yes.
Mr. James was there.
Yeah, I was there at that time.
Oh, yeah.
I was in his MIS.
It's around 10 years
Yes,
back.
yes, definitely. I left in 2012.
I did a number of activities for ONGC whenever I get chance.
Are you, sir? Come down.
Definitely.
I'll take your leave because I have another meeting lined up.
Definitely, sir. You continue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Keeping continuity of our program, respected speaker, Shri N.S. Siddiqui ji, Professor and Quality Manager, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, Dehradun. Sir, you are requested to kindly enlighten us with today's theme of green and clean fuel.
Yeah.
Siddiqui sir, please.
Yeah. So, good morning to all of you. This is Dr. Nehal Anwar Siddiqui, working as a Professor and Program Director, Sustainability Cluster, Health, Safety, Environment and Civil Engineering, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, Dehradun. So first of all, I am thankful to the management of ONGC, who has given me a chance to interact with you people on the occasion of Section 22. And I'm really thankful to Mr. Alaria, who is engaging me for these activities. So thanks, Mr. Alaria, for inviting me on this particular day. So my area is actually health, safety and environment. And when we see the problem of this fossil fuel or maybe a traditional fuel, we see the aspects of pollution. And when we see these aspects, I think we start witnessing that number of cities in India are start facing problem of air pollution. Some of the pollution problem which we don't see is maybe a noise pollution or maybe sometimes water pollution. But air is very, very clear that city like Delhi, I think Delhi is where before we start using it for COVID-19. So, and if we will not stop using this fossil fuel regularly and in another manner, or you can say the way we should use it properly, as Mr. Basin Manager has informed, that we should stop our cars and vehicles at the red light. But still we are not following. So these are the small things, but actually they will play a very important role. So what I have done, I have framed my lecture in such a way that it is actually talking about some general points of clean energy or renewable energy. So it's like an awareness lecture. So I will try to use it by using some of the PPTs as well as some of the videos which I have collected. So first of all, why we are going for renewable energy or clean energy? It is actually sustainable, something that can't run out or endless like the sun. So nowadays the word sustainability is coming everywhere. Whatever you do, you should be sustainable. So if we will not stop using excess of petrol or natural gas, I think the time will come that when our future generation may not see it. So these are called alternative or green or clean energy. These are the terms which are associated with renewable energy sources. Actually, the meaning of this sources of energy that are alternative to the most commonly used non-sustainable sources like coal. So everybody who is sitting here now, I think they now see the best example of electrical vehicle. So which is in surrounding, without noise and without any pollution. So we can say that we are witnessing the future which is coming up. Maybe in 5 or 10 years you will find that most of the vehicles which are running by using these traditional fuels may not be present. But once they will be operating, there may be new problems. Problem of e-waste is going to come. When we see the option which we have as a renewable energy or a clean energy sources, we have solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, hydro energy, biomass energy, and tidal energy. And some of the things I think are very common nowadays when we talk about a city like Dehradun. Most of the houses you will find that they are using solar energy. Even hostels of universities and colleges, they are also using solar energy. So a lot of promotion is going for solar energy. But when we talk about wind energy, maybe not relevant for this area, but again it is very useful in some of the other areas. So I think future of renewable energy is going to be great. We are targeting that it may be around 100% by 2050. So if you see the division of these, I think with offshore wind 11.5%, onshore wind 38.2%, concreting solar plants 2.4%, solar plant solar, which is again nowadays picking up with a lot of schemes from the government, 5.4%. Then commercial and government rooftop solar 9.9%. Even our university is producing a lot of energy through solar. Wave devices 0.3%, geothermal again a big area 0.7%, hydroelectric 5%, and tidal turbines 0.1%. So we are expecting that by 2050 most of the things will be on renewable energy sources only. Just to share my experience, I have traveled number of countries, especially when we visited Middle East, but they are also working on these alternate energy sources. So they are going for these sources because they know that they can't survive without this energy and they need a lot. So they are working on that, and I think slowly they are moving to this renewable energy sources because they have a lot of sun available. When we see India's mission is 175 gigawatt by 2022. India made a commitment in Paris Climate Agreement, which has happened in past, to reduce the emission intensity of the economy and for having at least 40% of electrical power installed capacity from clean energy sources by the year 2020. And when we see the breakup of this, the maximum is coming through solar energy, 100 gigawatt, wind energy 60, biomass energy 10, and small hydropower 5. So that way I think they are working, and I'm also interacting with the THDC. I think they are also working on small hydropower. Now the second one is bioenergy. The biomass is a biological material derived from living or recently living organisms, and most often refers to plant or plant-derived material, which are specifically called lignocellulosic biomass. As an energy source, biomass can either be used directly via combustion to produce heat or indirectly after converting into various forms of biofuel. Even as a scientist, I have visited number of places in Punjab, and I have seen that number of people are using the biomass to convert energy. In some of the paper mill they are using. Conversion of biomass to biofuels can be achieved by different methods, which are broadly classified into thermal, chemical, and biochemical methods. Plant energy is produced by crops specifically grown for use as a fuel that offer high biomass output per hectare with low input energy. So sugar industry is one of them. They produce a lot of energy. The grain can be used for liquid transportation fuels, while the straw can be burned to produce heat or electricity. So rice husk, rice straw, I think I have seen. Plant biomass can also be degraded from cellulose to glucose through a series of chemical treatment, and the resulting sugar can be used as a first generation biofuel. So the next one is solar energy. The potential for sun to supply our power need is huge, and 1 year power you can get in 1 hour of sun power. So power is collected using solar or photovoltaic cells made from silicon, and these cells transform sunlight into electricity, and it can power anything from the smallest garden light to entire neighborhoods. So I think now we have seen the good example of using solar light. Rooftop panels can provide power to home, and solar farms use mirrors to concentrate the sunlight, can create much larger supplies. Solar powered energy systems are clean energy source since they don't produce air pollutants or greenhouse gases. And I think this month we can see that in Dehradun we are deficit of around 96% rain. So again we can say it is a big example of climate change. And if we don't reduce greenhouse gases or air pollutants, this problem is going to be worse in coming years. If the panels are responsibly sited and manufactured, they can also count as green energy, that they don't have any adverse environmental impact. The next one is wind energy. Wind energy works like old-fashioned windmills, using the power of the wind to turn a blade. Motion of these blades causes turbine to power a generator which produces electricity. When wind turbines are sited on land, they need to be placed in areas with high winds, such as hilltops or open fields and plains. Not very good option for cities like Dehradun, where we have mostly calm period. So here wind velocity is low, but very good in some of the coastal areas and areas in Rajasthan. So this is the pictures of onshore wind turbine system, offshore wind turbine system, you can see. So when we see wind development in India, we are the third largest energy consumer. Potential is around 300 gigawatt. Current status 39 GW by March 2021. And because of COVID-19, it has reduced to 65%. And we are targeting in 2022, 60 GW, and 2030, 140. So that way we are increasing our capacity. Geothermal energy is again a next option, although the ratio is quite less as compared to solar and wind. Geothermal energy uses the heat trapped in the Earth's core, which is created by the slow decay of radioactive particles in rocks at the center of the planet. By drilling wells, we are able to bring highly heated water to the surface, which can be used as a hydrothermal resource to turn turbines and create the electricity. And this renewable energy can be made greener by pumping the steam and hot water back into the system, thereby lowering the emissions. So again, it will help in lowering the emissions. So I will share a video with geothermal so we can understand more. Video plays a very important role in understanding.
Geothermal energy is the heat energy acquired by the earth. Here, the source of the heat is earth, hence the name is geothermal. Heat inside the earth is available at a depth of more than 80 kilometers. In some locations, it is available at a depth from 300 to 3000 meters. Such locations are referred to as geothermal fields. Geothermal energy is used for heating water, air conditioning, electricity generation, greenhouse heating, etc. History of geothermal power plant. The world's first geothermal power plant was built in the year 1911 in Larderello in Italy. Working principle of a geothermal power plant. There are three types of geothermal power plants. Let us study the working of each. First is the dry steam power plant. In this power plant, steam is generated directly from the geothermal reservoir. This steam is directly supplied to the turbine, which is coupled with the generator. The flow of steam causes the turbine to rotate. And because of this, the generator produces electric energy. After rotating the turbine, steam goes through the condenser where it is converted into water. This water is called as condensate, and it is injected back into the earth through the injection well. Natural dry steam hydrothermal reservoirs are very rare. The next type is the flash steam power plant. This type is used where there is an availability of geothermally heated water at a high temperature of over 350 Fahrenheit. This water is called as brine, and it is transferred to a vessel where steam is generated. This steam drives the turbine coupled with the generator to produce electricity. The waste brine is injected back into the earth. Power plant. This is used when the at lower temperature of up to 100 Fahrenheit. Here, the hot water is passed to a heat exchanger which is combined with the secondary liquid with a lower boiling point such as butane and pentane hydrocarbon. A mixture vapor is generated and it runs the turbine. The mixture vapor is cooled by condenser and the liquid is recycled. Wastewater is injected back to the earth. As this power plant requires two liquids, water and secondary liquid, it is called a binary cycle power plant. Let us study the advantages and disadvantages of a geothermal power plant. Thermal and nuclear power plants need fuel to produce electricity, whereas geothermal plant does not need any fuel for production of electricity. Ultimately, this saves expenses on fuel. Geothermal plant does not pollute the environment. It requires minimum land space compared to the other plants. However, geothermal power plant has some disadvantages. As geothermal fields are not available universally, these power plants are found rarely. The cost of infrastructure and drilling is also very high. In this session, we learned about geothermal energy, the history of geothermal power plant, working principle of a geothermal.
Okay, so I hope that it is very clear how to produce geothermal and what are the advantage and disadvantage. The advantage that you are getting a clean fuel and you are not polluting the environment. This is again a picture working of geothermal power plant. We have seen the working. If you see the geothermal energy trend in India is regarded as a poor cousin to its more glamorous cousin wind and solar. As I told you that the percentage wise it is also very low. However, geothermal energy possesses one attribute that others do not. Geothermal energy in India, like other places in the world, is moving at snail's pace due to project development and financing problem. As we have discussed, it is slightly costly. And India is capable of generating 10 GW, which is the entire world's generating geothermal capacity. So quite high. And India proposes to harness 10,000 megawatt, 10 GW of geothermal energy by 2030 through active international collaboration with countries such as US, Philippines, Mexico and New Zealand. However, it needs strong government support and incentives along with financing to develop its potential. The next one is hydro energy. I think we are, as a state, we are very rich in hydro energy. Hydroelectricity power works in similar manner to wind power, that is used to spin the generator's turbine blades to create electricity. And hydropower uses fast-moving water in reverse on front from waterfalls to spin the turbine blades, and it's widely used in some countries. And Tehri Dam, which is having capacity 2,400 megawatt in Uttarakhand, is the highest hydroelectricity power project in India. Hydroelectricity dams are a renewable energy source, but these are not necessarily green energy sources. So that way they have some impact on the environment. Many of the larger mega dams divert natural water resources, which creates a negative impact for animal and human population due to restricted access to water resource. However, if carefully managed, smaller hydroelectricity power plant under 40 megawatts do not have such a catastrophic effects on local environment as the divert just a fraction of the water. So it is better to go for smaller hydropower. And this is the diagram which shows that how it is created. So Union Cabinet chaired by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has approved following measures to promote hydropower sector. Larger hydropower projects to be declared as renewable energy source. As per existing practice, only hydropower projects less than 25 megawatt are categorized as renewable energy. HPO as a separate entity with non-solar renewable purchase obligation to cover LHPs commissioned after notification of these measures. SHPs are actually already covered under non-solar renewable purchase obligation. The trajectory of annual HPO targets will be notified by Ministry of Power based on projected capacity addition planned in hydropower sector. Necessary amendments will be introduced in the tariff policy and tariff regulation of operationalized HPO. Tariff rationalization measures including providing flexibility to the developers to determine tariff by back loading to tariff after increasing project life to 40 years, increasing debt repayment period to 18 years, and introducing escalating tariff to 2%. And budgetary support for funding food moderation component of hydro projects on case-to-case basis, and budgetary support for funding cost of enabling infrastructure, that is road and bridges, on case-to-case basis as per actual limited to 1.5 crore per megawatt up to 200 megawatt projects, and 1.0 crores per megawatt for above 200 mega projects. The next one is biomass energy. Again, a very old option, and people are using it, although the shape is changing. Biomass energy uses organic material from plants and animals, including crops, trees, and waste wood. The biomass is burned to create heat, which powers steam turbine and generate electricity. While biomass can be renewable if it is sustainability source, there are many instances where this is neither green nor clean energy. So that is one drawback. Studies have shown that biomass from forests can produce higher carbon emissions than fossil fuels, while also have an adverse impact on biodiversity. Despite this, some forms of biomass do offer a low carbon option given the correct circumstances. Sawdust and wood chippings from sawmills, for example, can be used for biomass energy, where it would normally decompose and release higher levels of carbon into atmosphere. Even we have done, as a scientist, a number of trials for pulp and paper industry waste, and we have converted briquettes, and which we were running in boilers. So this is a picture of biomass gasification. You can see how they are producing energy. I will try to show a video which is again on biomass energy production. So
You hear the word biology. Do you know what it means? Let's break the word down. Bio means life. Logy means the study of something. So if we put bio and logy together, we get the study of life. Now, let's look at some other words that begin with bio. Biography is the story of someone's life. Biodegradable means something that can be broken down by living organisms. A biologist is a person who studies life and living organisms. Now that you know the meaning of bio, let's learn about two more important bio words. The words are biomass and biofuels. Let's break those words down, starting with biomass. We already know that bio means life. Now, let's look at the word mass. A tire is made from rubber, and a car is made of metal. Both of these things are made up of matter. In fact, everything is made up of matter, including you. Mass is the amount of matter that objects are made up of. Even though a tire and a car are both made up of matter, the difference between those items and you is that you are living, and those other things are not. So, when we add the word bio in front of mass, we are talking about matter that comes from living things. All living things get their energy from the sun. Plants get it through a process called photosynthesis. Biomass, or the material from plants or animals, has stored sunlight or energy in them. This energy is released or comes out when there's a chemical reaction, like people eating those plants. The food is then broken down in your stomach through digestion. The energy is then released and feeds your body. That's why it's so important to eat good food. The better the food, the more energy it has to keep you moving. Some plants are grown for us to eat. Other plants...
So I think I will try to show you in one video only, that is slightly longer. So now we see a biomass energy trend in India. India has achieved the target of 10 gigawatts of biomass power before 2022. So good effort with the present installed capacity of 10.17 GW of biomass power. And the country has also nearly achieved the 5 GW target from small hydropower projects with the present installed capacity of around 4.8 GW. However, unlike the solar and wind power target, the central government has no plans to scale up the biomass power and cogeneration target for 2030, even as the sector has the potential. So as we have discussed, because it is having some impact on the environment. The next one is tidal energy. Clean energy offers a renewable power supply option, and tide is ruled by constant gravitational pull of the moon. And the power that can be generated by the tide may not be constant, but it is reliable, making this relatively new resource an attractive option for many. However, care needs to be taken with regard to environmental impact of tidal power, as tidal barrages and other dam-like structure can harm the wildlife. So this we have to take in care that where we are going to generate this tidal energy. According to estimate the Indian government, the country has a potential of 8,000 megawatt of tidal energy. This includes about 7,000 MW in the Gulf of Cambay. In Gujarat, 1,200 MW in the Gulf of Kutch and 100 MW in Gangetic, Delta and Sundarbans regions of West Bengal. So again, I wish to show a very small video on tidal.
Energy from the natural rise and fall of the tides into electricity. Tides are caused by the combined effects of gravitational forces exerted by the moon, the sun, and the rotation of the earth. Tidal plants can only be installed along coastlines. Coastlines often experience 2 high tides and 2 low tides on a daily basis. The difference in water levels must be at least 5 meters high to produce electricity. Tidal electricity can be created from several technologies, the main ones being tidal barrages, tidal fences, and tidal turbines. Tidal barrages are the most efficient tidal energy sources. A tidal barrage is a dam that utilizes the potential energy generated by the change in height between high and low tides. This energy turns a turbine or compresses air, which in turn creates electricity. Tidal fences are turbines that operate like giant turnstiles, whereas tidal turbines are similar to wind turbines, only underwater. In both cases, electricity is generated when the mechanical energy of tidal currents turns turbines connected to a generator. The generator produces electricity. Ocean currents generate relatively more energy than air currents because ocean water is 832 times more dense than air and therefore applies greater force on the turbines. Tidal power is easy to install and renewable. having no direct greenhouse gas emissions and a low environmental impact. Because the ocean's tidal patterns are well understood, tidal energy is a very predictable energy source, making it highly attractive for electrical grid management. This sets it apart from other renewables that can be more unpredictable. However, adoption of tidal technologies has been slow, and so far the amount of power generated using tidal power plants is very small. This is due largely to the very specific site requirements necessary to produce tidal electricity. Additionally, tide cycles do not always match the daily consumption patterns of electricity and therefore do not provide sufficient capacity to satisfy demand. That's tidal power.
So now let us see the advantages of renewable energy. Offers a range of benefits, including offering a freely available source of energy generation. As the sector grows, there has also been a surge in job creation to develop and install the renewable energy solution of tomorrow. And renewable sources also offer greater energy access in developing nations and can reduce the energy bills too. Much of renewable energy also counts as green and clean energy, and this also created a growth in renewable energy, with wind and solar being the particularly prevalent. So as we have seen, the larger percentage is because of solar and wind energy. However, these green benefits are not the sole preserve of renewable energy sources. Nuclear power is also a zero carbon energy source, since it generates or emits very low levels of CO2, but that is having other hazards, and because of that it is not that much promoted. Let us also discuss some of the disadvantages of renewable energy. Many renewable energy sources cannot be relied upon all times. When the sun goes down or hides behind a cloud, we cannot generate solar power. When the wind doesn't blow, we cannot create enough wind energy. Therefore, fossil fuels are still in use to top up renewable sources in many countries. This variable production capacity means that large energy storage solutions are required to ensure there is enough power when renewable energy generation dips. So that is a requirement. An alternate solution is to deploy several renewable technologies, creating a more flexible system of supply that can counteract dips in production for a given source. So if one source is not there, there will be another source. So that way you have the advantage. Some renewable sources such as hydropower and biomass do not suffer with these problems of supply, but these both have their own challenges related to environmental impact assessment. In addition to this, some renewable energy sources such as solar and wind farms can create complaints from local people who do not want to live near them. So, conclusion, I think before I go to conclusion, I wish to share a slightly broader view through a video. Sir, you have a time? Or
no rush.
Energy in other ways. Their biomass or leftovers are converted into fuel. A tree is a great example of biomass. If you have ever seen a tree get taken down, you might then put into
How do we build a sustainable world for generations to come? How do we protect our cities and harness the power of technology for our common benefit? Humanity has always been good at forward thinking. In this series, using the latest Bloomberg research and analysis, we will make sense of the challenges of tomorrow. Inequality, artificial intelligence, managing our megacities, the gender gap, and the demographic time bomb. And in this film, will the sun power a sustainable world? For generations, we've relied on the might of fossil fuels, but these are dirty, volatile, and finite. What comes next? Are we on the verge of an energy revolution where the power of renewables, led by solar, will change the lives of everyone on Earth?
Hi, I'm Jeff Goldmere, GE's Fuel Guy.
And I'm Simon Blakey, the IHS Market Energy Expert.
Today we want to talk about the future of hydrogen and its contribution to a potential future low-carbon.
Fossil fuels have built our world. Coal and oil found deep within the earth are carbon-rich resources which pack a mighty punch. They're abundant, they're easy to transport and store.
If we weren't digging up fossil fuels, we couldn't have had an industrial revolution. A lot of our agriculture would be impossible. We'd probably have great difficulty feeding our current population, never mind having smartphones and electricity and all these things. Certainly it would have been difficult to build our civilization without fossil fuels.
Nearly 100 million barrels of oil are used around the world every day. In 2014, fossil fuels accounted for 85% of world energy consumption. But governments are worried about climate change and pollution.
We see this in the world cities, from Shanghai to Mumbai and even to New York, Paris, London. Air pollution is becoming an increasingly important issue politically, and of course you've also got climate change. Increasingly policymakers world over recognise the need to act.
Fossil fuels present a political challenge for the West. The biggest oil reserves are found in regions which are often hostile or unstable. As well as political worries, consumer habits are changing.
Historically, the energy system has been driven by big investment decisions made by big energy companies, supported by government. And increasingly, consumers have more choice that enables them to make energy decisions of their own. For example, they might choose to put solar on their roofs. They might choose to invest in the increasing number of energy storage options. They might buy an electric vehicle. Until recently, we were sort of dumb consumers. We had no information about what we were buying, how much we were using, and that's changing very rapidly.
But removing fossil fuels from our energy mix is a daunting task, one which could potentially shake our economies to their core.
If we flicked a switch overnight and switched from fossil fuels to renewables, I think there would be widespread chaos, because honestly, we haven't really figured out even how we would do it.
But the cost of energy is changing. The financial shocks of the early 21st century may have disrupted the economics of the energy market.
I think the financial crisis had two effects. The first was it generated over $190 billion of stimulus funding for the green economy. Industrial output fell, electricity and energy demand fell, households became more thrifty, they were more mindful of their energy consumption. They started thinking about ways to reduce their bills. But you combine weaker demand with more renewable energy, and what you created was the beginnings of the disruption that we currently witness.
The results of this disruption can be seen around the world.
So, as of 2014, Greece was generating 9.5% of its electricity from solar. Italy was generating 8.7%, and Germany 6.3% of its electricity from solar. Now, those are not massive numbers, but they do illustrate that you can have a real economy that runs substantially off intermittent renewables without the sky falling.
Solar itself has come down about 75% in the last 5 years. Wind energy has got about 25% cheaper over the last 5 years. So those two technologies are now competing directly with the more traditional, conventional sources of electricity. Now the question is, how do you integrate a system which has variable and intermittent supply and increasingly choppy demand? And the technical side of how do you make that work in a much lower carbon environment?
Tony Sieber is a writer, academic and renewable energy investor who believes not only will we make renewables work, but that we are already in the midst of an energy disruption which by 2030 will signal the end of the fossil fuel economy. This disruption will transform the lives of every person on the planet, and what's driving it is not pollution or politics. It's price.
It's soon going to be in everybody's best selfish economic interest to have solar panels and batteries and electric vehicles. It's purely economics, and that's how technology disruptions happen. Purely economics.
This course to take charge of your time, इसके ऐड आप बहुत बार देख चुके हैं. I know that. आप शायद तंग आ चुके हैं.
Tony Sieber is a Stanford University academic and renewable energy investor who has spent a lifetime studying how the rise and fall of technology can change the world. He believes we are now experiencing one of the most significant technological disruptions in modern history. A clean disruption, which by 2030 will herald the end of our current energy mix and the birth of cleaner power in every corner of the world.
There are 4 essential technologies that are going to disrupt all of energy and transportation. Batteries, solar energy, electric vehicles, and autonomous cars. And these are all disruptive in their own way, but when you combine them, it's super disruptive. It's exponentially disruptive. And that combination is going to make all of energy and transportation obsolete.
People fear disruptions, but Tony Sieber believes they shouldn't.
What happens in disruptions is that there is a destruction of wealth, but also there's a creation of new wealth. So the web destroyed a lot of the old publishing wealth, but also if you look at the top web companies, the top internet companies, that's $2.4 trillion in market valuation, $2.4 trillion. This is the new wealth.
Tony is a long-term investor in solar energy, which he believes is leading this clean disruption. Whilst it accounts for barely 1% of world energy today, its growth has been rapid, and its costs are falling.
Solar in Australia, on the rooftop, unsubsidized, is cheaper than the cost of transmission. So think about what that does to the existing business model of central generation. Even if you can generate at zero in your nuclear or coal plant or whatever, when you add the cost of transmission, you still cannot compete with solar.
Renewables have historically been plagued by the problem of storage, the ability to keep enough energy in reserve when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. But here too, the economics are changing.
So lithium-ion batteries are the form of energy storage that are winning right now. And lithium-ion batteries have been improving at about 16% per year on a $1 per kilowatt hour basis. So if you keep that 16% cost curve going, essentially by 2020, the average American household, which consumes more electricity than anyone on Earth per capita, will be able to store a full day of electricity for $1 a day. In Australia, it's already becoming financially viable to store a few hours of electricity. And within 4 years, 5 years, it's going to be basically for the cost of a latte, you'll be able to store several hours of sunshine every day for the cost of a latte. Solar is already cheaper, unsubsidized than any other form of energy. So we're getting to the tipping point. And in technology, what happens with the tipping point is that it accelerates. Demand accelerates dramatically, and disruptions happen very quickly. The point at which rooftop solar plus the battery in your home, in your factory, in your business, in your hotel becomes cheaper than the cost of transmission. That is going to happen sometime between 2019 and 2022 everywhere on Earth.
This disruption will transform not just our homes, but the way we get from A to B.
Transportation is undergoing the most massive disruption in a century. Essentially, the last time we went through this disruption was when we went from horses to electric streetcars and internal combustion engine cars, which happened a little more than 100 years ago. So essentially, three things are going to happen in transportation, are already happening in transportation. All vehicles will go from internal combustion engine, basically fossil fuel powered, to electric vehicles. They're going to go from 100% human driven to 100% computer driven. And it's going to go from car ownership to essentially not owning a car.
The implications for companies that build cars are enormous. It could mean the end of the automotive industry as we know it.
When vehicles go to all electric, self-driving, and car shared, we're going to get the same level of service. Basically, you're going to have a car picking you up at home, taking you to work, and then taking you to the bar, and then taking you to the supermarket, and then back home for 90% less cost.
And the implications reach far beyond who builds, sells, and drives cars. Tony believes the design of our cities, the urban fabric of our lives, could change forever.
Now, what's going to happen then is that the number of cars that we need is going to go down. So think about cities like Los Angeles, where 60% of the landmass is parking and roads. Basically, 80% of that is going to be obsolete. So this is going to give the world, for the first time in a century, the possibility to redesign our cities, to totally redesign the landscape, how we want our cities to be.
Tony Robbins, Sandeep Maheshwari, Oprah Winfrey, Damon John, Bob Proctor, and many, many more.
Taken together, these changes amount to almost a complete revolution in energy use. Whilst oil may still be needed for aviation and the manufacture of plastics, Tony thinks demand for fossil fuels, fuels which have built the world as we know it, is about to collapse.
Oil is going to go through what salt went through in the Middle Ages. So 60% of petroleum goes into transportation, 60%. That's gone. Things like coal, gone. We're going to have zero need for coal. Things like natural gas, except for fertilizers, gone. That market is going to implode totally.
It took decades for oil to dominate the world economy. Tony believes the dominance of renewable energy will happen much more quickly.
When we transitioned from biomass to coal to oil and so on and so forth, we went from one type of extraction of mining energy resources to another. And those transitions took a long time, 50 or 100 years. But technology disruptions don't take place in 100 years. They take place in months. Solar is a technology. The energy source is the sun. It's free. So we don't need to go necessarily from one extraction to another. It's basically solar panels, period. And the same thing with electric vehicles. It's a technology.
The shape of renewable technology is changing all the time. Technology now exists to manufacture transparent solar panels.
Now, when we think solar, we think rooftops. But in the not-too-distant future, in only a few years, we'll be able to convert our windows. I mean, imagine every time you look up and you see one of these high-rises full of windows, that could be a 3-megawatt solar power plant. If all we do is go through the existing technology cost curve for batteries and solar and electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles, essentially all of energy and transportation is going to be obsolete by 2030.
The clean disruption Tony foresees has huge political implications. It has the potential to transform the economies of entire nations and change the balance of power across the world.
For the Middle East, the implications are massive because when the West does not value, when oil has no strategic value, then are we, the West, going to be involved in the Middle East the way we're involved now. No, we're not, right? So the countries, California or Korea or Germany or China, the countries that lead the clean disruption are going to be the countries that lead the 21st century.
In the North African desert, one country is embracing this bright future. Morocco has just switched on the world's largest solar power plant. Soon, energy from these skies will be exported to the richest economies in the world, with the potential to transform the lives of millions.
Hi, I'm Jeff Goldmere, G's fuel guy.
And I'm Simon Blakey, the IHS Market Energy Expert.
Tony Sieber is an academic and investor in renewable energy. He believes we're in the midst of a dramatic energy transition. At the center of this is solar power. Enough sun falls on the surface of the Earth in 1 hour to power the entire planet for 1 year. But the technology needed to capture it, store it, and export it has been problematic. Until now.
Here on the left you can see the Nor1 power plant, solar power plant. So as you can see, you have a very big solar field with the parabolic mirrors, and you have about 480 hectares of what is the total area.
This is the Nor1 solar power plant in Ouarzazate on the edge of the Sahara Desert in Morocco. The first of 4 gigantic plants, which, when finished, will combine to make the largest concentrated power plant in the world.
We have a surface of 1.4 million square meters of mirrors, so it's about 500,000 mirrors. They're separated in 7 areas because of the altitude and because of the water drainage system. It's going to be enough to provide energy for 2 million people.
The Noor project uses new technology to overcome one of the biggest drawbacks of solar power, the inability to deliver energy when the sun is not shining.
The focal axis in the very center, you have a liquid that is called HTF, heat transfer fluid. So all the radiation, the rays of the sun are converging in this fluid. So you can see there, we have 2 tanks, very big tanks, with 45,000 tons of molten salts that keep the energy after an exchange, a heat exchange with the HTF for about 3 hours. So in case we need to produce electricity after the sunset, we can take this salt and make an exchange with the HTF and the water to produce again in the night electricity. For the future plants that are being built right now, we will be able to produce between 7 to 8 hours of extra production during the night.
Noor promises the possibility of 24-hour solar power. It also promises to transform the economy of Morocco, which imports 94% of its energy from abroad. As well as transforming Morocco's economy, solar could turn the nation into an energy exporter.
Lors de Ouarzazate, maintenant c'est le soleil, il est plus sain, plus écologique que le pétrole au fait.
So, I think it was a very good video which is talking about the future of alternate energy, and you have seen that countries like Middle East, Egypt, how they are growing their solar capacity. So in the last, renewable energy looks set to be a large part of future mix, along with other clean sources such as nuclear power. The drive towards a greener future for power production is promoting a rise in job creation in renewable power industries such as solar and wind. And this trend looks set to continue as government strive to reach net zero. So hopefully our future is clean energy, and that is the only solution by which we can protect our earth, because if we will not do will not opt for cleaner energy or greener energy, I think we are going to see the impact of this climate change, which is going to very, very horrible. So with this word, I will end my session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please give a warm applause for a very beautiful session and deep learning. I request Shri Z.S. Alaria sir to kindly welcome our much awaited dignitary speaker, Shri Anjam Rai, Director IIT Dehradun, with lucky bamboo shoes, please. Respected Anjam Rai, Director IIT Dehradun, so you are requested to enlighten the house with your deep learning, please.
Just let me calculate. Okay. Okay. Let's conclude.
The slides.
Yeah.
Change the logos. Whenever so what I will do, I will test mail. My area is actually health, safety and environment.
Good morning. First of all, my thanks to ONGC for inviting me here, and all the guests. It's a very interesting talk by Professor, and I was following that video with great interest, because that video is very clearly done from a strongly Western perspective, where there is a huge luxury of land, and the conventional philosophy has always been centralized. And yet you could hear him saying that every house will become a net generator as cost of generation falls below cost of transmission. It is this theme of decentralized energy that we will talk about today. And because this is under Saksham 2022, hosted by PCRA, I think we must keep an eye on the fact that every wasted bit of already generated energy has a hidden cost, and an enormous hidden cost when those wasted pieces of generated energy add up over billions of them. In fact, one of my favorite slides comes from a gentleman called Monty Hempel. He passed away a few years ago. He was the University of Redland. And he would say that if you're an academic, what is the point of having publications or fellowship societies or whatever else if the world is going to collapse in 50 years? What good is your academic learning? And he would cite an Indian parable where a very learned man has to cross a boat, cross a river in a boat. And he's asking the boatman, do you know why the boat floats on water? The boatman says, no, but I know it floats because I make it from wood. Then he asks the boatman, do you know why the river flows in this direction? The boatman says, no. So he says, so what do you really know? He looks down at the boat. And then a storm comes and the boat is about to sink, and the boatman says, sir, do you know how to swim? So it's a little bit like that. We are now in a world where we measure success by shareholder value or economic growth or dividends paid. But what does the financial success have to do if there is no planet to serve 50 years from now? And on top of that, personal success, our own satisfaction. Can we consider ourselves satisfied when around us we see so much social inequality. And strangely enough, the underpinning element of that inequality is energy. We are sitting in an air-conditioned room because we're from an organization where we can afford it. What percentage of the world actually uses air conditioning in terms of people? It's very few. Also, I'm looking at this room, and this room will be what? It will be about 10 meters by 5 meters, 50 square meters of room, with a height of probably 3 meters. So 150 cubic meters of space. And in the 150 cubic meters of volume, how much is our body volume of the 20 odd people sitting here for which we are running the AC? It's cooling everything else also, which doesn't need to be cooled. So perhaps in today's talk, I will try to revisit the way we look at how energy is used. And let me start before I go to the next slide. We won't go there yet. Okay, let's go to the next slide. But when we go there and we talk about these three parts of human well-being, the three E's, ecological, economic, and equity. Can any of, maybe because, it is, I prefer interactive, but let me just see if anybody out here knows which single category of industrial product has the biggest opportunity, in fact, is the biggest contributor to fighting climate change or to fighting greenhouse warming. Does anybody know? As of today, without talking about all the futuristic things we saw, which product category can contribute most to fighting climate change? And I see a lot of blanks because this question isn't asked. It's not taught in our schools and colleges. And when I give you the answer, you're all going to look very surprised. The answer is a lubricant. Lubricants are the greatest warriors towards climate change. And as I progress in the talk, so now this is my teaser, we will see why it's the greatest warrior. Let us proceed to the next slide. So this is sustainability. 60% of the vertebrate animals that were there when I was young are gone. In some parts of the world, more than 90% are gone. And now that there is a war happening somewhere else in the world, luckily, perhaps for us not so close, but the implications of that war are going to reverberate around the world because every bomb that is dropped, a typical bomb is of the order of 2,000 tons, a decent sized bomb will have about 2,000 tons of explosive power. And it will generate enough carbon dioxide equivalent to 10,000 vehicles operating crisscrossing Dehradun for 100 kilometers a day. Right. So we're talking about reducing global warming on one hand, but on the other hand, there's a concentrated global warming effort going on, which is a war against humanity. Anyway, we will look at sustainability as the core basis for this energy saving or energy conservation or sustainable energy discussion. And let us go to the next slide to get an understanding of what sustainability actually means. It doesn't mean that we do one thing. It means that we simultaneously do all 17 things on that slide. And that's not easy. I would encourage everyone to look at the Niti Aayog website, which lists 169 indicators of these 17 goals. And I would even encourage that if anybody is doing any project, whether it's a capital project or a research project or a service project, and it is not serving one of those 169 metrics, perhaps it shouldn't be done. The time has come to actually make hard choices of what is reasonable and what is not. And because ONGC has been India's forerunner, India's energy company, and has made choices over the years in fossil fuels, but has also made the recognition that it has to invest beyond fossil fuels because the time of fossil fuels is slowly moving out of human interest. We have a great obligation amongst us as oil and gas professionals to re-examine everything we do. Let's go to the next slide. These are the two very basic rules of sustainability. One, we should either only use renewable resources which can be harvested at the rate of regeneration capacity. So we put all these solar panels. We must put solar panels knowing fully well what we will do with them at the end of their life. Otherwise, at the end of 25 years, those solar panels guaranteed. The contractor has walked away, my warranty is over, and you are stuck with it. What do you do with it? Does it become another new scrap heap? So where is the research in solar panel recycling? If it isn't there, it should be there. And in non-renewables, we must build very strong scientific mathematical models on the rate of depletion versus the rate of reforestation, the rate of realignment, the rate of carbon capture. Every time I take something out of the ground, I must find a way to either put something in the ground, or I must find a way to ensure that what is above the ground can be reutilized and reutilized, so that I'm extracting less and less every year. And then the output rule, which is the waste rule, which is where I was a moment ago, that what is above the ground, we must mine it better. Our overground mining capability, whether it is lithium from lithium-ion batteries that will go into all this energy storage that we talked about, or whether it is the metals and silicon from the solar panels, or whether it is, all these cars are going to get scrapped, right? The new car scrappage policy is there. So when the cars are getting scrapped, what happens to all the engines which are perfectly good and functional? Are we going to throw the engines away and then build similar engines for rural water pumps? Why can't I use car engines as water pumps? So where our thinking has to change. Everything I look at, even this little bamboo pot, I look at this and I say, this is great. It's sustainable because it will take in CO2 and will produce leaves. But what can I do to improve its ability to absorb more CO2 and produce more leaves? Also, if I have only bamboo groves in Dehradun, what does it do to my local biodiversity? What does it do to the butterflies that use other things that the bamboo might displace? So it's not straightforward. We have to have a very great understanding, which we cannot do individually, across those 17 goals. And we must constantly ask ourselves, when I'm addressing one goal, am I by any chance taking a few steps backward on a different metric? It's with that critical self-analysis that we can progress, not only as a company or as a country, but as a universe. Next slide. This is the major problem. And this is the overconsumption report. Today, if I forecast it further, this is up to 2000, this is a 2009 report, but if I look at what's called the Earth Overshoot Day, there are countries which use up their quota of resources every year by the 9th of February of that year. Qatar is the world's most over-consuming country. The USA is up there. India is at the bottom, but it's not because we are not over-consuming. It is because there is a very large chunk of India that is not able to consume at all. So if I look at the main blocks of this, which is biomass, minerals, metals, and fossil fuels, you can see that all of them are growing. We are over-consuming. Overconsumption means the ability, the extracting more than the earth can sustain the extraction. We are over-consuming everything. And a simple way to think of overconsumption is, how many clothes do I actually need and how many are actually in my cupboard? It's a very simple way to look at overconsumption. Let's go to the next slide. This is what we have done in 250 years of progress. So driving up, while we have driven up GDP, we have also driven up motor vehicles, and we've driven up all the other things, whether it's species extinction, loss of tropical forest, fishery zones, ozone, everything. So we can see that progress has a direct link with resource utilization. Which brings me to my next slide. This is the core thinking around what we try to do today at the institute where I am at IIT. We're the first institute to have a resource efficiency division. And we look at everything we do on whether we can do the same thing with less resource or with it. Because only then, and only if we measure it, can we improve it. The idea is, can we ensure that the development needs are met without negative aspects of excessive resource utilization? And that means truly questioning every single thing we do. Next slide. So we want to go from a linear economy which takes a resource out, dumps it on the table and leaves it there. Eventually it lands up in a trash heap. that trash heap becomes a mountain of garbage. The mountain of garbage catches fire somewhere and pollutes the air and generates more CO2 and makes the earth hotter. Instead, can I recycle things, reuse them, and if I cannot recycle or reuse, can I reduce using it? We should not hear the phrase that our economy needs to grow, so environment mein to kuch asar padega. There is no reason why it should be either or. We have to decouple the two. We have to learn to grow our economy without destroying our environment. And we have to remember that unlike the Middle East and Germany and California, from where you saw that nice video, USA's population density is 1/12 of India. We don't have that kind of land. We have to support a much larger population with much less land. So if we blindly copy the models done elsewhere, as we have done in the past, we will probably fail again. Let's go to the next slide. These I've already mentioned. These are the material resource categories: fossil, biofuel, metals, and non-metals and minerals. And everything has a capacity to be drawn or overdrawn. If I start saying I will do only biofuels or I will only do biomass, and I start cutting down forests to feed my boilers because I don't want to use coal, I have not really benefited. So even when I scrap something, we talk about e-waste. This is a country of mobile phone users. Everybody changes their mobile phone every 2 to 3 years. Even in the villages, they will change their mobile phone. And that is driven by the behavior of the mobile phone sellers who keep adding features and reducing support to the operating. You have to buy a new phone. So what do? What happens to the old phone? Where does it go? What happens to the cobalt in it? What happens to the arsenic in it? What happens to the gadolinium in it? We don't know the answer. None of us have looked there. Can we start saying that we will only buy mobile phones from companies that will take it back and show us how it is recycled? Will it not force a change in mobile phone behavior? So some of these deeper questions, almost philosophical questions, become more important to us as scientists and technologists than our day jobs, if we want to truly believe that we're doing something for the earth. Let's go to the next slide. I was in this working group 3 for 14 days, every day till 4 in the morning. The country delegations were arguing over the exact language of the report. But something came out very clearly. What came out was that solar and wind energy and avoidance of energy, which means energy efficiency, methane capture and other things. The 3 blue boxes, very few things in that slide are blue. And you can see that only the 3 blue boxes.
Just 2 minutes, Mr. Siddiqui is going.
Please excuse us, guest is leaving, so I request that is welcome. Sri Anand Siddiqui, sir, with Bukya Pranam. Thank you.
So going back to this IPCC report, what has clearly emerged is that it is no longer good enough to talk about reducing CO2. It is no longer good enough to talk about mitigation alone. We have to start accepting that disasters will happen, and we have to start preparing ourselves better for disasters. The adaptation of this phrase called adaptation and mitigation. Let's go to the next slide. And this is where I come to the piece that I told you about right at the beginning. That whenever I'm over-consuming, whether it is an extra pair of shoes or whether it is just taking my IC engine car out for a drive because I want to see the city, or whether it is driving solo in 5 different cars when 5 people would have gone in 1 car, I am having to produce more goods, transport more things, travel more passenger kilometers, use more heating, cooling, power, etc. And even the 1 billion good morning messages that go out across India every day, the energy used in that could have saved 100,000 babies who don't have access to neonatal care today. And that is the equal amount of energy. So what is the choice? 1 billion good morning messages or 100,000 babies saved in incubators? All of these require machines. And most of us who have studied science, or at least have studied science in school, we know that a machine takes in energy and gives out work. And no machine is 100% efficient, so the work it gives out is less than the energy it consumes. That's called the efficiency. We go to the next slide. And since it uses energy, it enhances greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, if for every machine I could improve its efficiency, which is what lubricants do, I can actually reduce global warming significantly. I would say that for every machine used by every entity who is on this call, every member of PCRA, we have to relook at the energy efficiency being given by the lubricants, at the frequency of oil change, and at the way lubricants are used and managed. Even transportation of fuel requires fuel. In India, we import some 200 odd million tons a year of fossil fuel, of petroleum. And out of that, 1%, 2 million tons, actually goes in transporting crude oil and crude oil products. Why must I move so much oil around? So these are the things to remember when we re-examine and make a new beginning towards Saksham, towards being responsible energy consumers, not just efficient energy consumers. Next slide. So clean and green energy, which is item number 7, affordable and clean energy, more correctly, is number 7 of the Sustainable Development Goals that I showed you. But the reason why the Middle East or US can talk freely about putting solar energy under thousands of kilometers of desert, it is because if I look at the Middle East and North America, they have been historically the worst consumers of energy over the years, over-consuming, whereas let's say in Africa or in India or in parts of the island countries or some parts of Central America, consumption is far, far lower than the global average. In fact, the highest consumer in the world at a community level divided by the lowest consumer is a factor of 1,000. Let's go to the next slide. So energy access is directly linked to prosperity, but it comes at an environmental cost. And you look at those green and blue lines, those are China and India. Even though our per capita energy consumption is still relatively low, our absolute consumptions are growing. And we have to keep in mind that per capita thinking will only become effective if we follow that resource extraction rule, that the amount of energy we consume has to be efficient and not wasteful. Every person leaving a room switches off the lights. When every person driving a car switches it off at the traffic light, and when every person who could take an elevator takes the stairs instead, then we will start seeing real impact. Next slide. So these are our global CO2 emissions. On the left side, we use all the 4 groups, electricity, industry, building and transport. On the right side, we reallocate the energy of electricity to the others. And when we see that, we can see that more or less all the categories contribute equally or significantly, industry being the largest contributor. Let's go to the next slide. Now we turn that into a little bit of India-specific maths. I told you we import carbon, right? We import carbon atoms. We import crude oil, coal, chemicals and polymers. All of these add up to about 350 million tons of carbon atoms that we bring in from abroad every year, and we also pay a carbon cost, not only a foreign exchange cost, to bring it in. So about 7 to 8 lakh crores we pay for these imports. But if I look at what we have within our country, we'll go to the next slide, please. And we start seeing how much carbon we are spending to move the carbon that we are buying. Then we can re-examine, can we change our entire thinking to a decentralized energy production mode to local consumption? Go to the next slide, please. And look at these numbers. The domestic carbon that we throw away every year, including the ignored areas of sewage, dairy, fisheries, animal husbandry, we throw away more carbon atoms than we import as a country. In theory, if we learn to harness all the carbon we throw, and this is even excluding our coal reserves and our gas emissions, if we learn to harness all of this, we could actually be truly Atmanirbhar, never having to import fuel again, never. This is possible, and I think our Honorable Prime Minister knows this. That's why he has made a commitment to a net zero in 2070. I will go beyond and say it's not only net zero emissions, it should be net zero fossil fuel imports. And it's theoretically possible, and it's practically possible. Let's go to the next slide and see how. These are the imperatives. Some of these are Niti Aayog indicated targets. Twice the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is not only about lubricants, of course, it is also about machine design itself. It's also about materials and everything else. And twice the global share of renewable energy in energy mix. But more importantly, can I generate fuels competitively and sustainably at scale, right? So at scale is important. Can I produce 50,000 barrels a day of diesel equivalent? Can I produce 1 million barrels a day of petrol equivalent? Can I produce 500,000 barrels a day, 500,000 tons a day of LPG? That's what we have to get to. So doing a research project saying that I have got a technology that makes hydrogen at lab scale will not be good enough. We have to think of 4 parameters. First, whatever I replace, will it perform as well or reasonably well so that the user will accept it without additional risk? Your e-bike should not catch fire just because I have switched to it. Secondly, can I get enough? Cost to bhul jaiye, is there scale? Can I get ethanol blended petrol in every city, biodiesel blended diesel in every city? Where is the scale? Third, just as we saw in solar power, when you get scale, you get cost. Cost comes down. But until you invest in building scale, you can't bring the cost down. And lastly, we'll talk about the sustainable matters. How can I measure the net carbon emissions and all of that? And that brings you to the 4 parameters that you have to...
Please, the owner of these following vehicles are requested to remove the vehicle from the parking area. The vehicle names are UK07DX8057, UK07DK2457, UK07DR0800, RJ14CL5997, UK07DX7024, UK07TB9202, UK07FB2284. And then जो ड्राइवर जिनकी ये गाड़ियां हैं, जिनके नाम अभी लिए जा रहे हैं, उनसे अनुरोध है कि वो अपनी गाड़ियां इस जगह से हटा लें प्लीज। गाड़ियों के नंबर इस प्रकार से हैं UK07DX8057, UK07DK24,
Sorry about that little interruption. Let us go to the next slide. So these are the supply side solutions. For every fuel that we use today, whether it is jet fuel, whether it is diesel, whether it is marine fuel, LNG, CNG, for everything, the fundamental knowledge of technology to make an alternate fuel is already known. It is already available. What is missing in most cases, if you look at the right side, is the supply chain. In some cases, it's a feedstock management aspect. But it is not as if we do not know how to make these. We just haven't put as much effort behind it as we have put behind fossil fuels. If instead of building 2 new mega refineries, we build 50,000 decentralized plants, the cost will be 1/10 for the same outcome. Let's go to the next slide. This is the energy mix. We hear about biofuels all the time, but this is the complexity of the biofuel energy system. And ideally, you must start putting solar and wind into this so that instead of having only solar or only wind and then having to use fossil fuel to power the balance, you get solar wind biohybrids. We're doing quite a lot of work on that in our campus. And we're hoping to have the first battery-free solar wind biohybrid system operational by the end of this year. We also see at the bottom of this slide, the green ones are the ones that have already made progress. The black ones are the ones where we need to offer some policy interventions. Down there, the brown ones are where there are some really, really large opportunities for India. One is sustainable aviation fuel, where we need to scale up feedstock. And this is a good opportunity for CSR for many of the large companies because the land is available, the farmers are available. Just a small amount of funding to put in the seeds can go a very long way in energy replacement. The other option is methanol, particularly from stranded gas assets. Wherever you're flaring gas, don't flare the gas, make methanol instead. And that methanol can be transported anywhere in India. And at site, at location, it can be converted to DME because it's a liquid easy to transport. And then DME can be blended with LPG up to 20%. So you can bring down your LPG imports. These are all obvious things. All it needs is those things, the scale and cost investments. Next slide, please. This is something we do in Dehradun itself. Right now, we have about 25 participating halwais, hotels, and kitchens. And we are able to collect almost 1,500 liters per week of used cooking oil, which is turned into biodiesel and jet fuel in our campus. This is something that can be done very easily right here in Tel Bhavan because you have a canteen. I'm sure that that cooking oil is going down the drain. It can be collected and probably it will give you enough diesel to run your own generator. Next slide. In fact, ONGC has several campuses here. Yes. So every campus could be doing this. And the process is so simple. You just take the used cooking oil, you add the proprietary solvents and the non-proprietary catalysts that are available, and you just leave it for 2 hours. It requires no electricity. It requires only unskilled labor. At the end of 2 hours, you have biodiesel. We are putting this in the Char Dham Yatra. The news item came out yesterday. So along the Char Dham Yatra, the hotels are already full. We are putting these units. And we will be able to use the biodiesel produced to run the Vikrams on these routes as a blend to diesel and all the generators at all these hotels. So expecting to reduce, this year is a trial, but next year we are hoping to reduce 35,000 liters of diesel consumption during the Yatra. Next slide, please. This is biojet fuel, a more centralized model because jet fuel production requires a much higher level of quality control. And we have flown the first flight from Dehradun to Delhi in 2018. And we continue to produce the fuel at our campus here at Mokampur in Dehradun to fly Air Force planes. We have now got acceptance across all Air Force flight categories subject to OEM approvals. And we have a demo plant concept which is ready for 15,000 liters a day, which will be coming up hopefully at an ONGC site. The agreements are, the NDAs etc. will be signed, but this demo plant is expected to be at an ONGC site somewhere in South India, probably by next year. Next slide, please. Another big resource is waste plastic. We see it everywhere. In Dehradun, we have about 22 tons of plastic wasted daily. Some of it is clogging up our Rispana and Bindal rivers or is found on the roadside on the way to Mussoorie. And we have now set up 17 plastic banks across Dehradun. Different institutions have volunteered small place of about 10 by 10 room where people can deposit their waste plastic instead of letting it go to the Kachra and Kabadi. And those plastic banks are being collected and sent to our campus through our partner SDC Foundation. We go to the next slide. We are able to collect 1 ton per day and we are able to convert it to petrol, to diesel, and even to benzene toluene xylene for manufacture of polyester. And this 1 ton per day plant, built with the help of GAIL, has been now running for over 3 years.
Where please?
In Mokampur.
Mokampur.
It's on our campus. It's a 25-meter high, 5-storied building. And we run it with our own students and temporary staff.
How long it takes to get the conversion done?
From 1 ton of waste plastic to 800 liters of Euro 4 diesel takes us 1 day.
Okay, 1 day. 800.
We run our buses with it. If you would like to have your bus run on it, please send your bus. We'll fill it up.
Yes, yes.
Next slide, please. So this is what the plant looks like. This technology is now being developed. We are using the demo plant on our site to tidy up some of the flow aspects of highly variable plastic feed. And we've signed an MOU with the Delhi municipal corporations to put 3 plants of 10 tons per day over there. So they will each produce about 8,000 liters of diesel. If the plastic is dirty, then maybe 7,000 liters.
So this also requires proprietary solvent, as you have discussed?
No, this requires a proprietary catalyst, and this is done with GAIL.
Okay.
So GAIL is a co-license for this project.
Here the catalyst is proprietary, basically.
Everywhere it is important to have some kind of technology control so that the technology is neither misused nor does it cause harm from a safety, health, and environment perspective. So we maintain control, and in all plants that we license, we maintain oversight. We even audit books of accounts. We have plants licensed to 20 refineries in India. We have a catalyst that we sell to Saudi Aramco in the Middle East. We've displaced the top 2 players in the world, and now Saudi Aramco buys only IIP catalyst, but not necessarily for this. Next slide. So this is another one which is a very low-hanging fruit, especially in places like IMA Dehradun and LBS Academy Mussoorie, where there are horses and where all the gaushalas in this area. We are not doing enough with our bio-wastes, not even with our sewage wastes. We can make biogas. From biogas, we can make bio-PNG, and that PNG can simply go in a pipeline. It's natural gas of better quality. We are already running this for 4 years in Pune now. We are about to move the same thing to somewhere in the Haldwani region. That plant is being shifted even as we speak today. So ONGC has also made investments in coal bed methane. The same technology can be used to convert coal bed methane to highly pure methane and CO2 as a byproduct. The purified CO2 can be used for something that we don't even look at these days, which is to create a cold chain in India through on-site production of dry ice. India is short of cold chain, but we have enough CO2 to make dry ice. Nobody's doing that, and it's a great opportunity for ONGC to look at making dry ice plants from your coal bed methane plants. Next slide. So this is the story. I think is fairly clear. What I've told you is that sustainability is not, it's not optional. It has to happen. And the key to it is whatever we are throwing away. If we can examine what we throw and why we throw it and how we throw it, we can do a lot with it. Also, I don't really believe that refineries will vanish and crude oil imports will shut down in India anytime soon. Energy will remain carbon dependent for quite some time to come. And therefore, we must look at carbon atom management, reuse all the domestic carbon we can, and biofuels, which are an important component of the overall solution, have to be partnered with other things like energy efficiency, where I mentioned lubricants, but also simple things like shutting off energy when we don't need it. Yeah. With that, let me give you a glimpse of my campus. We measure our sustainability on the last slide. We measure our sustainability by our biodiversity. We have 205 bird species on campus, close to 100 butterflies and moths. And any morning you take a morning walk, you will see something like that. That's large drones. You're all welcome to come visit us to see how we can actually keep a campus completely pristine. We have we have 2 freely moving leopards on campus. Elephants come in from time to time. We have pythons, and it doesn't bother any of us. I see them on my morning walk, and we've learned to coexist. With that, I think if all human beings learn to coexist with nature, and we made investments at our level rather than expecting a government to do something or a company to do something, I think we can have a pretty sustainable world pretty soon. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Now I request respected Zaida Salare, sir, to propose the vote of thanks.
Respected Sri Anjan Roy, Director IIT Dehradun. It was a very useful and informative lecture on the biofuel. So everyone can be benefited by this alternate sources of energy. And I once again thank you all, and a special thanks to Sri Anjan Roy, who has spared his valuable time to come over here and deliver the lecture. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Kindly consider our guest of honor with
No, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we are having the lunch also.
Yeah, I will not.
Okay, okay.
Jana Perez. Yeah.
क्लोज करा दो रमेश जी। थैंक यू।